Upscaling is suddenly everywhere. AMD has just released FSR, which is their own smart upscaling solution. Nvidia already has DLSS, and then we have tools like Waifu 2x and Gigapixel for everything else we want to upscale. All of these methods use different upscaling techniques to try and make an image look higher quality than it did before. So what if we upscale and upscale? Can we FSR a DLSS, or Gigapixel a Waifu? Can we just keep adding more and more detail to everything forever? Let's begin by repeating the same upscaling technique several times, because this should make it clear what its limitations are. Here's a lovely bunch of foxgloves in high resolution, just so we know what they're meant to look like. Now let's crush this image down to a super low resolution, and then let's upscale it. And again, and again. Not a bad result. In fact, given the circumstances, I think it's a really good result. But what we see here isn't reality. This is how the original looks in comparison. I'll jump between them a few times, just so you can see the differences. Upscaling gives the impression of adding more detail, but the more it adjusts the image, the further it deviates from reality. In other words, upscaling makes a better first impression, but it holds up worse with scrutiny. So in this sense, the limitations of upscaling depends on how many artifacts you can tolerate. Interestingly, because the backdrop was blurred, the upscaling has tried to refocus it, so the result is something that's less blurry than the original. But that doesn't mean it's better. The upscaled plants look convincing at first, but if you zoom in and compare them with how they're meant to be, you can see that the upscaler got their leaf patterns all wrong. And the foxgloves have become watercolours of their former selves. And that's it. Upscaling an image gradually distances itself from the original. It becomes a watercolour of its former self, because it's smoothing edges that have already been smoothed, or transforming groups of pixels into bigger groups of pixels. After a certain point, the upscaling no longer upscales the images, but merely its own upscaling efforts. But if you need to see the original to notice its limitations, does all this even matter? Given upscaling's strengths, it's no wonder that games are so keen to use it. Games have been fighting a war against pixelation and blockiness since time began. Anti-aliasing has been the conventional solution, but this comes with a frame rate penalty and has become less effective as game engines have become more complex. Upscaling, on the other hand, can now be easily added to games, and even lets them run faster than when it's not being used. Win-win. DLSS I have already covered many times. It is Nvidia's AI-powered upscaling solution, using subpixel details, motion vectors, and lots of clever trickery to construct a detailed and smooth-looking image. I still think it's the most effective form of upscaling that games can use, but it seems like Nvidia needs to be involved to get it enabled in games. Plus, you need an Nvidia graphics card to run it. FSR, on the other hand, is something new that AMD has just released. It doesn't appear to rely on AI or anything like that. Think of it more as a smart resizer that relies on a resizing algorithm to keep details crisp and pixelation to a minimum. I don't think the results are as good as DLSS, but FSR still comes with one big advantage, and that's how easy it is to integrate into games. It only takes minutes to do, as seen in GTA 5 recently, and doesn't even require input from the game devs or from AMD or Nvidia, so I expect FSR to be seen everywhere pretty quickly. And inevitably people will soon be adding it to games with DLSS already, and then they'll be upscaling. However, until then I'll just experiment with upscaling DLSS and FSR with Gigapixel, which I find produces good upscaling results. It's not without its problems, it isn't the best for faces, it does require manual tweaking for the best results, and it's slow. It can take a few seconds to upscale a single picture, so there's no way you could use it in real time for something like gaming. But it'll still be interesting to see if I can extract more information out of already upscaled images from using it. So I'll start with AMD's FSR because it's new, exciting, and everybody can use it. We'll try upscaling native 720p, then FSR Quality, and FSR Performance. Unfortunately, I couldn't test FSR's best quality mode, being Ultra Quality, because it messed with the shadows in this game for some reason. I even tried restarting it and everything. But the point is, can upscaling an already upscaled image improve it? First of all, we'll upscale a native image just to see what that looks like. This is 720p, and this is at upscale to 5K. 720p, 5K, 720p, 5K. The difference isn't night and day, it just looks a bit sharper. If we zoom in on it though, the difference becomes more pronounced, and you can see that the upscaling has made it significantly less blurry. The lines of the grass look smoother and less pixelated, and the grass texture here is made sharper, but more like a watercolour. The gems look nicer in my opinion. But the robot now looks more like a cartoon than the original art style may suggest. I believe that upscaling has improved this image, but has sacrificed a bit of the art style in the process. Now let's upscale an upscaled image. This is FSR in quality mode, and this is it upscaled to 5K. Again, not a huge difference, but zooming in we can see what's happened here. It has been made less blurry, and I'm not sure if things look more detailed or if they just display more artifacts than before. I'll be honest with you, I think when the base resolution is this low, FSR Quality mode has already deviated far enough from the original image that it's already beginning to look artificial, even before a second upscaling. And performance mode is even more extreme. It already looks like a 16-bit watercolor even before we upscale further. This may have seemed like a waste of time, but we've learned something important from this. If you want to upscale an upscaled image, that first upscale needs to have produced an acceptable quality image in the first place. So let's jump to a more sensible resolution like 1440p, which FSR Quality mode seems to work fine at. Great, this is probably how most people would be using it in practice anyway. And this looks perfectly fine. I'll reserve my thoughts about FSR for another video, but at this setting you'd be hard pressed to tell it isn't native resolution. Let's upscale this to 5K and see the result. It's subtle, but when I blindly compared both, I consistently preferred the one that had been doubly upscaled, simply because it had better clarity and apparent texture definition. The unfortunate conclusion here, though, is that double upscaling performs best when more of the legwork is done by having a higher base resolution in the first place. Sure, you can expect extra upscaling to deliver better clarity and sharper edges, but beyond a certain point it begins to betray the original art style. You can't expect a miracle, or for it to be able to conjure new details out of thin air. Now let's move on to DLSS. Does this method of upscaling squeeze every last pixel out of its upscale, or does it leave enough room for a second pass to have some value? This is DLSS Quality mode at 720p. I'm not sure what the base resolution is with DLSS because they're always a bit cryptic about it, and it varies slightly title to title, but I'm assuming the dimensions here are about 2/3 of native. And this is it upscaled to 5K, and I'm going to admit, I'm really impressed with this. Gigapixel has managed to extract a lot more clarity and detail from the image. I feel like this winter setting is ideal for upscaling, as it comprises of a lot of thin details and high contrast areas, which is stuff that upscaling loves. But regardless of how it did it, I got a really good result using Gigapixel to upscale DLSS Quality mode. It's effectively making 36 pixels out of every one that was originally rendered. If I compare it with a native 4K image, it's obviously nowhere close to that, not by a long shot. I can try sharpening the upscaled image to further boost the clarity, but I don't think it's worth it as it really highlights the limitations of the upscale. Having upscaled a lot of things with Gigapixel, I know another problem with this upscaling. It won't be temporally stable. In other words, the details will all flicker and shimmer in motion, which can be super distracting and not what you want from a video game upscale. So here's an alternative with different settings, which more greatly suppresses motion shimmering by hiding the smaller, less stable details. Again, it's a trade-off. This upscale will probably look better in motion, but it looks worse in still images, since now all the finer details like the tree branches and distant cross-bracing on the bridge have been reduced to a fine blur, and the art style has been made to look more like a watercolour. It's all a compromise, you don't get something for nothing, and while smoother, this second upscale no longer has as much detail to it as DLSS Quality did before the second upscale. And now, let's try DLSS Super Performance mode. This is an extreme setting, better suited for high resolutions like 4K or 8K, where each pixel is less noticeable. But I enjoy using it at lower resolutions because it reveals the secrets behind DLSS's upscaling. Again, I'm not entirely sure on the base resolution here. It's 1/3 of native at higher resolutions, so it might also be that at lower ones as well, but maybe not. Hence the question mark. All I know is that it's trying to upscale from a lower resolution than quality setting is. So let's see if I can upscale this upscale. I can't complain about this result if I'm honest. It appears better and less pixelated than simply resizing the DLSS image to 5K. And while DLSS Ultra Performance has a lot of visible checkerboarding, the second upscale from Gigapixel seems to do a good job of translating all of that into straight lines or into more organic looking details. I doubt this resulting image would be at all temporally stable. Even Ultra Performance mode has noticeable shimmer from it, and that's before the second upscale is applied. But screw it, let's upscale a few seconds of gameplay and see how bad it is. Don't expect upscaling a second time to reduce any flickering or problems with the first upscale. It's only going to make things like that worse. Yes, the result is sharper, but other than that, many of Gigapixel's improvements to the image simply don't hold up in motion. And this is just when standing still. So let's end with some looking and walking around, to really test the stability of upscaled upscale, and from such a low base resolution. In conclusion, want to upscale an upscale? Sure, you can do that. But don't expect to get something for free. It will ultimately be up to you whether you deem it worth having extra sharpness at the expense of detail, or higher frame rates, but ones which look partially watercoloured. For some people, that trade-off will be worth it, and for others running on slower hardware, they might not have so much choice in the matter. But I still question whether there's any benefit to multiple upscales, or if it's best just to choose one method and to go all the way with that one instead. Those foxgloves at the beginning, I didn't need to upscale them 3 times, I could have just done it all in one go. So that's why it's silly to suggest upscaling an upscale. And yet, it sounds like there should be value to FSRing a DLSS, or gigapixeling a Waifu, but perhaps there isn't if each upscaler has already been designed to go as far as it can before the illusion starts to break down. For good upscaling, each pixel fed into it needs to be worth something, and any kind of upscaling process devalues each pixel. It replaces actual detail with artificial generated filler, and at some point there is no use in going further. But it's been fun to do, and who knows? I expect FSR to get better as time goes on. Maybe one day, somebody will produce a gigapixel image of an FSR, of a DLSS, of a Waifu that will blow me away.